You know, right. The podcast that uncovers the origin stories of some of the biggest names in sports, media, entertainment, wrestling, and so much more. Nick Durst here along with Joe Calabrese. And Joe, we are very excited because we have yet another wrestling guest here joining our show, and he is a Hall of Famer.
Yes, he is a Hall of Famer, longtime SiriusXM radio host, the host of Busted Open, and the brother of Mr. Don Lagreca. So Nick and I had the privilege of meeting Don back at the Sportscaster Derby in May, but we welcome his brother to the show, David. Dave, welcome. How you doing today?
I'm good. Does my brother have a ring
No,
like this?
Does he?
No,
He does
Not
not.
yet. Not yet.
It's my Hall of Fame ring, okay?
Yeah. I wonder if they would give your brother a ring if the Rangers won a Stanley Cup for calling some of the games.
I would think they would, right?
I think so, too, yeah.
I think if the Stanley, I would think that the play-by-play announcers get a ring for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I believe Sam, Joe, Kenny Albert, he would get, and who else? Trying to think if there's anybody else. But yeah, I think the media team would get rings.
Yeah.
So how was it like growing up with Don?
Yeah, highly competitive, my brother. Maybe people don't notice, my brother was like a world-class athlete when he was younger. He went to college on a baseball scholarship, and he was a big-time pitcher for Don Bosco. And he probably, I think in his sophomore year in high school, he decided to get away from the baseball and focus more on radio. And yeah, my brother was always very good in sports, highly competitive, anger management issues. Obviously, you probably know that from listening to the show. But radio was something that he was always interested in, myself too. So like him and I would do like mock radio shows when we were kids. And this is like before, WFAN and all that stuff happened, like where there was sports talk radio stations and stuff. We would do, mock talk shows together.
Wow. So you guys, big sports fans growing up, but of course, you're more the wrestling guy. When did you start watching wrestling?
I was probably about 10 years old. I was by my buddy Jeff's house, and he was watching Georgia Championship Wrestling, and I had never watched wrestling before. And he says to me, he goes, "Do you watch wrestling?" I go, "No, isn't that fake?" And he's like, "Oh, no." He said, "The WWF is fake. The NWA is real." So I was like, okay. So I started watching NWA wrestling on TBS, thinking it was real. And then it wasn't until I started, kind of picking up on certain things where I was like, all right, maybe this isn't 100% real. But yeah, probably since I was 10, and I'm 52 now. So 42 years watching wrestling.
So you were bamboozled, huh? He told you it was real?
Yeah, I you know what though? I think he thought it was real. Like, I don't think he was trying to fool me. Like, I think he believed in it because it was like, oh, the WWF is fake. This is real, And then you're seeing a lot of blood and you're seeing all that stuff, and I'm like, maybe it is real, So,
listen, Dusty Rhodes was tricking his own family. He'd be wearing a fake boot around the house to make them think he was actually hurt. So makes sense your friend would think that.
Yep. Yeah. No, it was that's and again, for like a lot of younger people, they don't realize that they tried to make it real. They tried to convince people. Now it doesn't matter. They don't try to anymore. But like, yeah, they lived in that world where they wanted everyone to believe that it was 100% genuine.
So when you were younger, did you know you wanted to make a career out of this? And you attended William Paterson University in New Jersey. So what did you study there? And what was your first job out of college?
Well, I went to college initially for communications, but I actually changed my major to English when I transferred from Bergen Community College to William Paterson. When I graduated college, I didn't get into radio. I didn't get into radio until I was about 30. I was a bank manager. I was in finance. I did that, and then I was married, had a home, got divorced, lost my home, and that's when I was like, you know what? It's time for a new beginning, a restart. And it was then when I got back into radio and I started doing communications again. And then I got an internship at FAN, and then it just rolled from there.
All right. So me and David, both former WFN interns. How about that?
There
Probably
you go.
2 decades
I like it.
apart, but everybody walks through there at some point. So
It's a good way to start. I always say, and I taught for a long time. I taught, and I was also in charge of interns for sports at SiriusXM for quite some time. And I always said, get an internship at a place where you would ultimately want to work at. And that was always something that I preached, and that's something that I did. So
absolutely. So when did you decide you wanted to kind of pursue a career in wrestling broadcasting, and how did you go about creating Busted Open and getting that greenlit by SiriusXM?
wow, it was a tough one. I mean, obviously, always being a wrestling fan, I was the morning show producer on the NFL channel for a very long time, and I was trying to pitch a pro wrestling show to my boss, Steve Cohen, and Doug Mortman, who is also an executive at SiriusXM. He bought in. He loved the idea, and he was actually my original co-host when I started Busted Open. And he was somebody that really helped me try to really convince Steve Cohen. And we did 1 hour once a week, and then that went to 2 hours once a week, to twice a week, to 3 times a week, to where we are now, live 6 days a week. So it was a long journey. It was a long fight, but it was well worth it.
So who were some of your favorite wrestlers, performers growing up, people who inspired you? And through the years, what are some of your favorite interviews that you have done?
Well, my all-time favorite wrestler is Ric Flair. That is my all-time favorite. I fell in love with Ric Flair in late 1984, and he's been my favorite wrestler ever since. And I've actually got to interview him many, many times. As a matter of fact, for my Hall of Fame induction in Albany, he cut a video to like celebrate me and to congratulate me on the Hall of Fame, which is like, you talk about a full circle moment. But man, I got to be honest, it's hard to say like what my favorite interview was, because I've been lucky enough to interview everybody. And the one thing about pro wrestling is pro wrestlers have charisma, they have personality. So a lot of times when you interview athletes in the world of football or baseball or basketball or hockey, they're athletes first. They're not personalities. They're not characters. In wrestling, they're personalities and characters before anything else. So every interview is going to be entertaining. Every interview you're going to have fun with. And there's been a lot, but obviously for me, interviewing a Ric Flair, a Chris Jericho, a Jim Ross, who was an influence on me, all those interviews have been I've been very, very lucky to be able to interview just about everybody in the world of wrestling.
So on the flip side, what would you say was the worst interview you did? Maybe somebody really didn't want to be there, or it went off the rails, you got argumentative, or they were just there to push a product or something like that. What comes to mind in that category?
Yeah, my interview with King Kong Bundy and my interview with Ole Anderson were probably really the only 2 interviews that I can think of that were extremely difficult, that they just did not want to be there. They did not want to answer the questions. They weren't having fun with it. And it was a really, really struggle. It's funny, the interview with King Kong Bundy was live on Busted Open. So I was able to get out of it. And it was just like a 8-minute interview, and it was over and we moved on. The interview I did with Ole Anderson was a taped interview, and my producer left the room during the interview. So I couldn't end the interview. Like, I couldn't hang up the phone. I couldn't. So I wound up doing an excruciating, painful 45-minute interview with Ole Anderson, where he was pretty much just shitting on me for 45 minutes. And I was asking him what he thought of Ric Flair. And can I curse on this?
Yes.
Or
Yeah, sure.
so I asked him what he thought of Ric Flair. He goes, "Oh, Ric Flair's the shits." And then I said, "What about the Road Warrior?" "Oh, the Road Warriors were the shits." And he was just like, and he's like, "Well, you don't know anything." He's telling me, you don't know anything. Really, you're pretty dumb, aren't you?" And I was like, I would love to end this, but I couldn't. I'm like in the room with the headphones on, microphone on. He's over the phone. I can't hang up on him. I tried to like end the interview, but he just kept going. So that was without a doubt. And it's somewhere. Somebody has it someplace. Like we didn't air the full 45 minutes. We only aired like a little, like we condensed it to like 10 minutes. But somebody somewhere has that full 45-minute interview. And it was one of the first interviews I ever did. It was the first year of the show. So you're going back, that was going back to 2009 when that interview happened. And man, he was one just angry son of a bitch, that guy. And he hated me. He thought I was a dumb shit. So maybe I was, I don't know.
No, I don't think so.
Hey,
Not here.
it was almost 15 years ago, Joe. So I could have been a dumb shit. I don't know.
Well, the
I'm a
wrestling
dumb
business.
shit because I can't even work the freaking microphone to do this interview properly. I sound like shit.
No,
'cause
you sound fine.
I can't even fix the microphone, for God's sake.
Oh my God,
David,
Um,
you're doing a
Everybody's
great
listening
job.
to say, there's people listening and saying, boy, Nick sounds good and Joe sounds good. So why doesn't Dave sound good? Well, you know what? I could honestly say it's because of my dumbass that I don't sound good on this interview. So there you go. Ole Anderson was right 14 years ago, Joe.
So it's eating at you. So
Yes.
the wrestling internet community plays favorites and not favorites, right? So Russo is a guy that they love beating up on now. Jim Cornette is a guy that they love beating up on now. What other names would you say you hear thrown out there? This so like person not being great that you actually had a much.
I think it's because, he did a lot of a big body of work in wrestling. WWF extremely successful. I think the stuff he did in TNA was very successful as well. But I think everybody judges him on what he did in WCW. And WCW was a disaster. So I think like everybody just looks at that point in time as like, and then listen, it was bad. Like it was not good. But I think they only look at certain things. And with Jim Cornette, and I think a lot of his character and shtick, Jim Cornette likes to bitch and complain. And I think a lot of fans are like that too. So people love it and people hate it. But he's like he has one of the most successful podcasts out there, Jim Cornette. Consistently, he's number one, number two. Thankfully, Busted Open is up there as well. But so people love listening to Jim Cornette. So as much as people love to complain about Jim Cornette, they love to listen to Jim Cornette. Myself included in that, because I listen to him too. And there's things that make me shake my head, but then there's things that make me say, wow, yeah, he hit the nail right on the head.
Well, you always appreciate them because they actually worked in the business. So there's some familiarity there and stories and stuff that they've been exposed to that not a lot of
And you know
other
what,
people
Joe?
have been
That's a
exposed
great
to.
point. It's about respect and understanding that they have done stuff that we have never done. It's the same thing with wrestlers. Like you may dislike a wrestler or something, or you may label that person a jerk, but they lace up the boots and they walk into that ring. That deserves our respect because they're able to do something that we have never been able to do. So you always have to have that in mind.
So let's piggyback on something you haven't been able to do. People out there right now who you have not met or have not had the opportunity to interview. So throw out a couple of names who you would love to just have in the studio with you or have the privilege of interviewing right now?
Like I said, I've interviewed some of those holy grail people like The Undertaker, and the one person that I have not been able to interview is The Rock. And I've interviewed them all, like John Cena, I've had multiple times. I have never been able to interview The Rock. And I wanted to interview him years ago about Polynesian Pacific Championship Wrestling. I was like, man, I would love to interview him about that. And then he does the show, The Young Rock, which is centered around Polynesian Pacific Championship Wrestling. And I'm like, son of a bitch. Like, I would have loved to have done that. And I'm still trying. And I don't think he does any radio at all. I don't think I've ever heard him do a radio interview anywhere.
This is it, Dave. This is the plan. Ready? When Moana Live Action 2 comes out, you get him to come in when he does the press tour.
Nick, every time he's had a show, every time he's had a movie, I've tried to like find a way to get him to come on the show. And I've never, and I even went on the air and said I would give him a free Dave Lagreca shirt.
Yeah.
I said I give him
hopefully
a free
we can
Dave
get 2 of
Lagreca
those
shirt.
too.
And then I even went above and beyond that. I offered it to give him a free bottle of my hot sauce.
There you
So
go.
I was going to give him my T-shirt and my hot sauce, and he still hasn't come on. So I don't know what the deal is with him.
He's ducking you.
I think so, and I don't know why, because I wouldn't ask him about anything like, you know, that he wouldn't want to answer.
Mm-hmm.
It would be a great friendly interview. But you're right, Nick. He's ducking me. He's afraid of me,
Right?
Which is fine. You know, that's fine. You could be afraid, but man up.
The Rock, and now will
Man
if The Rock ever returns to WWE, now we know from this podcast we'll see those signs that says Dwayne fears Lagreca. We'll see that in the front row.
Listen, to help with MJF. People had those signs with MJF, and I just did a town hall with MJF. So maybe that would work, Nick. You might be right on that.
Yeah. Hopefully the next town hall, Joe, you and I get the invite, and we'll go in and hang out with Dave.
If we would have done this interview prior, if you would have, you know, been smart and like.
Listen, Dave. I went through your hands
I would have invited
ahead
you.
of time. You canceled on us for MJF, so
understandably.
By the way, I did. I canceled you the day of that was August 21st.
Yep.
I had to cancel. I had the MJF town hall.
Of course. Next town hall, whoever happens to be, we got.
And then the next time, I click on the link, and it's just buffering. I'm like, where's Nick and Joe? Like, where's Nick and Joe? And then I think there was like a miscommunication. But I sat in front of my computer for at least 35 minutes, watching the little circle thing buffering, waiting for you guys to connect. But I'm glad that we're able to.
We got to talk to your management, but we're glad you're here, and you've done great interviews. So I think the biggest interview you could probably get right now would be Vince McMahon, current day and age. What would you ask him right away?
I've interviewed Vince McMahon.
Yeah, but the times are different now. Post scandal and everything.
I've interviewed Stephanie McMahon. I've interviewed Triple H. Just The Rock. The only one.
I think Vince right now, post scandal and everything, would be good. Have you interviewed Brock Lesnar?
I've actually spoke to Brock Lesnar when I worked with the NFL.
Okay.
I never interviewed him on
Vikings.
Busted Open, but I spoke to him when he was trying out for the Vikings. 2004, I think that was. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, I know one guy you probably haven't interviewed that we have multiple times, and that's former Raw commentator Adnan Virk. And I'm just wondering, Dave, why did WWE not give this guy a fair chance? They pull him off the streets of LB Network the day after WrestleMania. He's on Raw in front of no fans. You give him 6 weeks with no training. And meanwhile, you had Jimmy Smith down at the Performance Center preparing for this training. What happened? That was a weird era of the Thunderdome and an Adnan Virk. I thought he was getting a little better, but they just be like, yeah, we'll pull the plug.
Define better. Listen, I have no problem with Adnan Virk, the man. I don't know him, never met him. But like as a commentator, maybe you're right. Maybe they didn't give him enough time. Is that possible?
Yeah.
But he did do this one thing, and we actually used it as a joke on the show. He had the tendency to say, wow. Like he would say, wow, wow, a lot, wow. Now, you guys are obviously big wrestling fans, right?
Yep.
Now, I know it didn't end well, but you do remember CM Punk coming back to AEW, correct?
Yeah.
Yes.
Big deal, big deal. Comes back at Rampage. Oh my God, CM Punk. It was only just a little over 2 years ago. Now, on commentary for that moment, I believe it was Taz, Ross, Excalibur, and Mark Henry were the commentators when CM Punk made his return in Chicago in August of 2021. If you go back and watch that moment, WWE Hall of Famer Mark Henry, who was on commentary, as CM Punk was coming down their entrance ramp, he did his Adnan Virk impersonation. You actually hear Mark Henry say, wow. I'm telling you that to you. I don't know how many people caught that, but I'm actually sharing that with you, Joe, and with you, Nick. So that being said, the reason I'm telling you that is obviously Adnan Virk really influenced people.
I think so.
And like to the point where Mark Henry, the world's strongest man, WWE Hall of Famer, actually used his tagline on AEW TV. So there you go.
Well, Adnan
True
Virk.
story. Go back and watch it if you can find
What's
it.
good about Adnan is he actually would interact with his color commentators. The current commentator, Kevin Patrick, Joe's not a fan of. He feels like he always no-sells anything that Corey Graves throws a dig at him. What do you think about that? And why do they have a breakup?
I actually like the fact that he no-sells it.
Okay.
He's such a professional.
Yes.
That he's got a job to do, Joe, and he's focused, Joe. So he's not going to let Corey Graves throw him off at all.
No,
I know, Joe, you're a big I know you're a big Adnan Virk guy. All right. And I know that you're letting your own personal emotions affect the way you listen to the current commentating team. Shame on you, Joe. You need to be more professional like Nick.
I miss Byron Saxton.
Well, all right.
I miss Byron too. I thought Corey and Byron always had really good chemistry together.
All right. So, yeah. So obviously we're not going to agree on everything today.
I'm guessing you're a big Wade Barrett fan, Dave?
Love Wade Barrett.
All right. I think it's so awkward with Michael Cole on color on SmackDown with Kevin Patrick. I feel like that's a tough spot for KP to have Michael Cole on commentary with him, and you're supposed to do play-by-play.
That's like you're doing play-by-play in front of one of the greatest play-by-play guys of all time. But if you're going to be under the learning tree, I can't think of a better learning tree than that. So,
all right, Dave, let me ask you a question. Personal preference. I have always preferred a traditional two-man booth. The three-man booth works if the three personalities mesh together. And for a while, WWE has always tried to throw stuff at the wall to see if it sticks. Now, are you a personal fan of 2, 3? Because I don't like the way AEW does it. I think sometimes they have too many guys,
4,
too many cooks in the kitchen.
4's
a lot.
4 sometimes.
Too much. It's too much. And also, what do you think about Vic Joseph and Booker T and NXT? Because I think they do a tremendous job.
Well, I mean, 2 things. One, I like the two-man booth. I agree with you. It gets too muddy down after that. Like, I like just connecting with the two voices, the play-by-play and the color analyst. To me, that's perfect. And it's just like every other sport. Like, I love like Madden and Summerall, the way that they did a game. And that kind of brings me to, like you said, Vic Joseph and Booker T, because I think Vic Joseph is an excellent play-by-play announcer. Now, Booker T, he's not going to give you a lot when it comes to analyzing a match. But, and I actually said this on Busted Open, but I love the passion and the energy. Like what he doesn't give you in one instance, he overcompensates in another. Like, there's something about the well-timed imagery that he gives vocally during the course of a match that kind of brings that big match feel. That is it traditional? Is it something that I prefer? Probably not. But I and in a strange way, even though they're so different, I think Vic Joseph and Booker T have great chemistry together. I think they have really, really good chemistry together. And I think it's a big reason why I love NXT. NXT is slowly becoming one of my favorite shows of the week again. It was when it was the black and gold brand, but the storytelling that they're doing right now, it's slowly becoming one of my favorite shows of the week.
Yeah, nobody's got it better than Vic Joseph. He gets to work 1 day a week from home. He drives to work with his wife, works with his wife, doesn't have to worry about the wear and tear of the travel. So I envy him. That's why if I was ever doing commentary, I want to do backstage announcing. I would work for Impact so I could fly in once a month, film, and go home. That's the ideal schedule.
You know what? That's not a bad word. Or you can host Busted Open and just do the show from home and never have to leave the house.
Yeah, absolutely. That's probably great for you.
Do the show and immediately when the show is over, eat lunch. Like, it doesn't get any better. It doesn't get any better than that.
No. So we're talking commentators. Someone that WWE is really trying to push as a great lead commentator is Titus O'Neil. He's getting all the big matches. He got the Intercontinental title match at WrestleMania, and he was amazing. But who do you think is a great future once they retire as potentially the next lead color commentator for WWE?
Wow, I mean that's a great question. I actually think that Edge would do a great job in that position. Becky Lynch, I think, would be really good at that. Kofi Kingston, I think when he finally decides, I think Kofi Kingston would be a really good commentator as well. I know he already does it, but like on the AEW side, Jericho.
Yeah.
I think that's where he's going. He's fantastic at that. So those would probably be my answers.
I ultimately think we're going to see The Miz as the color commentator. And as we're recording this the first week of September. What a Miz TV on Monday Night Raw. When he interviewed John Cena, nobody else could see him. That was an all-time Miz TV.
But even though he couldn't see him, he still got the best of him. Like, I love the fact that he still beat John Cena. Miz is another one. I mean, the Miz is fantastic on the microphone. And he's a sports guy too.
Yeah.
So I think he understands like how important the commentators are. That's a good one, Nick. I think he would be
future
great.
Hall of Famer. Who inducts him? Is it John Cena?
Wow.
Every time Cena comes back, he starts it off with The Miz. So there must be some sort of mutual respect there.
I think it would be either John Cena or The Rock. Because I know that The Miz loved The Rock, and then you think about the program that they had at Survivor Series. But you know what, though? If I would guess that it would be John Cena.
All right. Speaking of the best, being inducted into the 2023 Pro Wrestling Hall of Fame, how was that experience and that accomplishment for you?
I mean, it's always great to be acknowledged. It was a great night just for the fact that I had asked Mark Henry to induct me, and unfortunately he wasn't able to do it because traveling to All In. But he was able to fit it in, and as a surprise, I didn't know he showed up that night to induct me, and I was a complete I did not see that coming. So I had a whole speech prepared, and then Mark inducted me. And then Mark got emotional while inducting me. So I had this this long speech prepared. And Seth Turner, who runs the Pro Wrestling Hall of Fame in Albany, he told me, I said, how much time will I have? He goes, 5-6 minutes. And I was like, Seth, that's not nearly enough. I'm going to need a lot more time than that. 5-6 minutes is not even close. Like, I need at least 15 minutes. So he's like, all right. They switched things around so that I could go longer. And then Mark inducts me. He gets emotional. I get up there, and I was so caught up in the moment. My speech was 3.5 minutes long. So like I didn't even go the 5 minutes that they initially wanted me to go. And they moved things around. I could go 20 minutes and I wound up doing 3.5 minutes. So yeah, but it was a great experience.
Absolutely. So I want to know, a lot of people want to know this. Where is Elias? What happened to this guy? Everybody wanted to walk with him. They could have capitalized. They could have did like a 5K walk with Elias back at WrestleMania was in New Orleans. He had a concert. He was very over. You know, the fans are chanting, you know, we are scumbags.
They canceled that concert, I think.
Yeah.
Didn't they cancel that concert, if I remember correctly?
I think they canceled the second one. He had like the one in Bourbon Street, and like the next WrestleMania, I think they canceled it. But he had one on Bourbon Street. They did like a whole Elias documentary. Remember, Michael Cole was like, "Oh my gosh, Elias is the greatest of all time." This guy, I thought, had it. What happened to him? Is he going to come back with Ezekiel?
I think I know they work for different companies, but I actually think that Elias is hanging out with Wardlow right now. Like they're just hanging out, absolutely. Being like, right, you know, waiting for the phone to ring, brother, you know, or they're on the trampoline waiting for that call. Like I honestly don't understand it, because you're right. Elias was as hot could be, and so was Wardlow. I mean, nobody was hotter. I mean, Wardlow was even on a different level than Elias. Like Wardlow was like world championship material.
Dave, I have a question for you regarding AEW, because my friends and I bring this point up all the time. Well, we think it's an incredibly well-run company. It's entertaining, the angles that they do, for what it's worth. Tony Khan is more of a matchmaker as opposed to a storyteller. But we've seen a repeating pattern, whether it's Wardlow, whether it's Miro, whether it's Hobbs, Brian Cage, Archer. They bring in these big performers, and you can include Big Cass in this. They bring in these big performers, right? But they don't necessarily know what to do with them, right? So a lot of the primary talents that they have been repeatedly pushing are more on the average to smaller side of things, which is fine because they're incredibly entertaining, good characters, good wrestling. But do you think AEW kind of has a problem incorporating that type of booking into their programming?
Yeah, I honestly don't have like an answer on why it happens, but it is an issue. The one that was glaring to me, because most people do bring up like Wardlow, and Lance Archer's another one who was really hot with Jake Roberts and then kind of fell off, which I still don't understand. The biggest one for me was the Keith Lee Swerve Strickland program, which went on for months. And I don't think they even ever had a match together. Like, so you had this program that lasted weeks and weeks and weeks, and this big buildup, and then it just went away. And there wasn't even a match where you could say, well, at least they had the match, and maybe that one match was they never got in a ring together, I don't think. So I honestly don't know what it is. I can't put my finger on it. I think there's been great stories, but we don't see that next step. Action Andretti is another one where Action Andretti beats Chris Jericho, and then Action Andretti is off of TV for weeks, and then he comes back and he's, you know, basically enhancement talent. Like, well, wait a second, didn't he beat Chris Jericho? Why did you have him beat Chris Jericho? Like, listen, I don't want to rag on AEW because I think they have done some great things and we've seen some great matches, but I would like to see more storytelling, and I would like to see stories that actually end up with a conclusion.
Yeah, they always have the big debut and then what happens from there. So we'll see how that shakes out. A lot of hours of programming right now, and who knows what's going to happen here.
Well, that's the other thing too, is they have 3 shows. They have 4 hours of programming on national TV a week. So they got to start learning how to incorporate more stories and have a thread throughout those 3 shows so that all 3 of those shows are must watch. And they're going to have to do that soon, because now without CM Punk, what's the draw to Saturday Night Collision? So, yeah, I mean, I think they'll be able to do it, but they don't have a lot of time to do it in.
Right. Need to reshuffle the deck. All right, I'm going to give you a few names here. You rank them in order of most likely to return to WWE in the order of when they're going to return. Matt Cardona, Enzo Amore, Ryback, Damian Sandow, Mercedes Moné, and CM Punk.
Okay, so you want me to gauge from like
who's most likely to return to who's definitely no shot. You don't have to rank them all, but you could just give some names.
Okay, Matt Cardona, I think will. I don't think Enzo will. I think Mercedes Moné will at some point, just not soon. Ryback, no. Who else?
Sandow and CM Punk.
Sandow, I would like to see back. I don't know if that window is closed. And CM Punk, I think will come back.
All right, we'll see how that.
But the one that I think out of all of those that definitely will, I think it will be, Sasha Banks, Mercedes Moné. I just don't think it's going to happen right now.
Right. So as we, we never got the 4 horsewoman fatal 4-way and the main roster WrestleMania. That could have been a great main event. So maybe one day that will happen. I know personally, for me, I love getting a new car so I can listen to the free trial of SiriusXM to listen to your show. So that's one of my favorite things about buying a new car. Just want to throw that out there. Do you think that Matt Camp is a sellout because he left your show for the bump?
No. It's, a couple of things. Number one, you can listen to the Busted Open podcast. You don't have to.
Right. Now, I listened to the podcast,
you don't have to,
but sometimes it's not like a live show with the call-ins and stuff.
But you can, you're not getting the full experience, but you can.
I listen.
You can listen to the Busted Open podcast. So you don't have, you cheap bastard. And then Matt Camp being a sellout. No, Matt Camp's not a sellout. Matt Camp is extremely talented.
Yeah.
Is it aggravating that he went to the bump? No, at first it was, but I don't think the bump draws the numbers like Busted Open does.
I don't think so.
So I think Matt Camp is probably saying, man, did I make the right decision? But I love Matt Camp. I think Matt Camp's very talented, and I love him on the pre-shows. I think he does a fantastic job. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think he needs some more pre-show opportunities. I worked with him at
sell out strong. Sell out strong.
He's the ultimate opportunist. He took advantage. He got where he needed.
Well, you have to.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the business. So for you, in your life, for your career, what would you say is your I'm right moment? What I mean by that is a time or place where you wanted to pursue something. You asked somebody for advice. They said, David, that's an awful idea. Don't do that. And you were like, you know what? I'm going to do anyway. And ultimately, you will see why it is that I'm right.
I mean, it happened a lot during the course of this show, like especially when I was trying to get the show to 5 days a week. There's a lot of people. I mean, I had many people say straight up, that's not stop. It's a nice tagline, but stop thinking that could ever happen. Like people told me that straight up. And, that was just, it's a bit of a kick in the gut when somebody says that to you, but yeah, I wasn't going to listen to that. Was not going to listen to that.
So we hope Nick and I made a good first impression.
Fun, Nick and Joe.
So in the future, maybe when you're off or on weekends, having Nick and I come in and running an angle where we kind of fill in for you. What do you think?
Well, I mean, no, but you never know, like how our relationship could blossom, where there could be something down the road. Let's not get Joe. Let's not get crazy like ahead of ourselves. Like this is. I've only known you for 43 minutes.
Sure.
Not a long time. Not a long time, Joe.
Well, Nick and I, we're rising stars right now, but this is my last question to you, so I wanted to set it up properly.
Now, Nick would have eased. Nick, I guarantee you, Nick would have asked that question in a completely different way.
Yeah.
Where it would have been like, oh, okay, so there's a chance. But like you asked it in a way where you got the hard no right at the beginning. You should have probably had Nick ask that question, Joe.
All right, well, it'll be a yes in time, I'm sure. But
You gotta
Nick
know
and
your limitations, Joe.
listen, Nick and
See,
I
what
are
I
rising
would have said, Dave,
stars.
is I would have said, every year I see you guys are posting a job opening for the executive producer. So I would have said maybe I'll be the next executive producer, work my way in, and we'll kind of build a relationship there. That's how I would have broke it down.
Yeah, I mean, or Nick, you could have been like, "Hey, this was fun. Next time, we'd love to get you in studio with us to do it, like so we're in person."
Yeah.
And then once that happens, then hey, we'd love to be a guest on Busted Open. Yeah, you know what? You had me over, so I'm gonna have you over.
All right.
And then that's how you build a relationship.
Yeah. Joe was actually recently on the New York Post with one of your guests, Candace Cordelia. They were talking SummerSlam on the New York Post live.
Love Candace Cordelia.
She's awesome.
Not to get personal, but Nick, are you in a relationship, Nick?
I'm married with a child. Yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Joe, what about you?
I'm single. That's why we work together.
So I knew that. I knew this because Nick knows how you ask somebody out, you go out for a while, you let the relationship grow, then you say, will you marry me? You get married, then you get stable, and then once you have full-time employment and you're making money, then you make the jump to starting a family. Joe, your problem is you want everything right away. That scares people off, Joe. You need to learn from Nick. And I knew it. Nick, I don't know. Right, Nick? I don't know you.
Correct.
But I knew. That's why I went in this direction. I knew your status and I knew Joe's status. I knew it right there. Just from the question you asked me, Joe.
Pretty
Just
damn
from
good.
that question alone.
That's awesome.
But I'm sure, but Joe, I'm sure that you're single. That's your personal choice. That's the way you like it. So that's good.
That's right. I'm right. But to my point, Nick and I are rising stars. So my last question to you is, rising stars in this industry, who do you have your eye on moving forward the next couple of years here?
Well, I was going to put you guys over. Like, this was a big deal to come on this show. I booked this. This was booked through my agent. My agent asked me to come on. How did you even get in touch with Rick? I don't even know how you got in touch with Rick.
On my way.
It's magic. He's got his ways.
And you won him over. So
impressive past guest list that speaks for itself, and the nominee for the Best Sports Business Podcast Award the last 2 years as the only independent company. I think the resume speaks for itself.
Really quick, Joe, and then I'll get to your question. Nick, who reached out to Rick?
Nick.
I knew it. See, because Nick knows the way that you ask to make Joe, I hope every time that you guys end your show, I hope you give a big thank you to Nick. I hope you say, Nick, thank you. Thank you, Nick. And then Nick says, you're welcome. You're welcome, Joe. You're welcome.
Get the shirts instead of thank you, Trish. Thank you, Nick. Stop wearing them, Joe. Dave's got the hookup with pro wrestling tees. We'll get them printed.
See, I know. I already know you.
Love that.
Wow, rising star. I really love Zoe Stark.
Anybody else?
No, I think Zoe Stark to me, when it comes to the WWE, I think she's going to be a major player in the women's division.
The Grayson Waller effect.
At Grayson Waller, I'm a big fan
with the big boys.
I'm a big fan as well. But I think Zoe Stark is like, I really do feel like she's the next big star. We're going to talk a lot about Zoe. I didn't know, Joe, that you wanted a laundry list of people. I kind of just focused on one person, Joe.
Okay.
Wow.
No, I figured you would throw out maybe 2 or 3 names, but I love Zoe too.
I love you, Joe, and you, Joe. Because you know why I think you're a rising star, Joe, and here's why. I think you're very good. Yes, great questions. You have passion, and you know what? Like you take advice well, and you let me answer. You don't jump on me. You don't jump on Nick. You guys don't jump on each other. at all. So I'm a big fan of both you guys.
Thank you for putting us over. We started the show 3 years ago during the pandemic, and it's only grown ever since. About 200 straight episodes of guests. So we've had a lot of familiarity with each other, a lot of practice doing this. But I couldn't agree more. Nick is one of the most important people in my life. He's a great
Wow.
friend. We have a great show going on. And what we do here is we always give our guests the last word. This is how we send it off. And then after the show ends, I thank Nick after. But so what we do is we give our guests the last word. So if there's anything else you would personally like to share or promote, by all means, go ahead, Dave. Thank you again for your time.
Thank you.
Let's continue building a relationship first. We'll go the slow route. I will listen to you. But yeah, we appreciate your time.
You got it. You know what? The last thing I'd like to, I want to get a shirt. How do I get a shirt?
You gotta
We
send
will
them
get you a
Nick.
shirt. No problem. We'll hook that up after.
You know, I'm right. The podcast. Where could the fans buy your shirt?
There's two ways right now. You can go to our social media and send a direct message, or you can go to millions.co. We have a new partnership with millions.co.
Millions.co.
You search You Know I'm Right, and there you go. But the quickest way is probably directly through us on social media.
All right, what's your tag?
At YKIR Podcast. You Know I'm Right Podcast.
Hold on. Do we follow each other?
We will
I don't
soon.
think so. You're pretty big time. I doubt you're following us.
You are big time.
At YKR Podcast?
YKIR. You know, as in You Know I'm Right.
I should have known that.
Dave, who do you think came up with the name for the podcast?
Nick.
Close. My wife.
Okay. Well, I mean, she's an intelligent
Absolutely.
woman, Nick. She married you.
She married Nick, yeah?
All right.
Yeah.
And
All right, we are following each other right now.
there we go. We followed you. On
Actually,
Instagram
wait a
as
second.
well.
I'm following you. You're not following me.
I just followed you back.
We'll follow you.
At least we could keep in touch now, Joe.
I mean, I was already following him on Twitter.
You got to first base. We got to first base with David now. The relationship's going to continue.
No, this is good. But that's my last word. I wanted you guys to get your stuff out there, so I'm excited to come on again.
I appreciate it, David, and we will definitely, hopefully, have you back in the future. This has been a lot of fun. Thank you so much for your time, and lots of laughs. I love you taking some shots of Joe. Good, entertaining stuff right here on the You Know I'm Right podcast. So that's going to do it here for this episode of You Know I'm Right. For our very special guest, David Lagreca, the Hall of Famer, and my co-host, Joe Calabrese. I'm Nick Durst, and this has been You Know I'm Right.